From the moment we are born, society heavily conditions us to believe that the secret to a fulfilling life is to care intensely about absolutely everything. We are explicitly taught to grip our relationships tightly, to obsess endlessly over our career trajectories, and to tie our fundamental self-worth directly to the external validation we receive from the world around us. But if you carefully observe the most powerful, highly respected, and genuinely peaceful individuals in the world, you will quickly notice that they operate on a completely different psychological wavelength. They do not cling. They do not beg. They do not allow their emotional state to be entirely dictated by external circumstances. Instead, they have mastered one of the most counterintuitive and misunderstood psychological principles in human existence: the power of detachment. Today, we are stripping away the modern obsession with hyperattachment. We are going to explore why desperately caring too much is actively repelling the exact things you want. Why the psychological concept of detachment is your ultimate shield against manipulation. And how learning to let go is the single most dominant move you can make in your life.
To fully grasp the immense power of detachment, we must first profoundly understand the crippling psychological trap of overattachment. The human ego is absolutely terrified of uncertainty. It craves stability, predictability, and total control over the environment. Because of this, we naturally attach our internal sense of identity and happiness to highly unstable external variables. You might attach your entire self-worth to a romantic partner, a specific job title, or how people perceive you online. From a psychological standpoint, the moment you deeply attach your internal peace to an external outcome, you instantly surrender all of your personal power. You have willingly handed the remote control of your emotional state over to a chaotic, unpredictable world. When you are desperately attached to an outcome, your behavior inherently becomes deeply neurotic, highly reactive, and suffocatingly needy. You start making decisions based entirely on fear. The fear of losing the person, the fear of failing the project, the fear of public embarrassment. This intense desperation acts as a massive psychological repellent. In psychology, there is a concept known as the ironic process theory, which dictates that the harder you consciously try to suppress a thought or force a specific outcome, the more likely it is to backfire. When you tightly choke the life out of a relationship or a goal with your desperate need for it to succeed, you actively initiate the exact sequence of events that will ultimately destroy it. This is where the profound psychological mechanism of detachment completely flips the script. We need to completely redefine what detachment actually means, because society has heavily stigmatized it. Most people falsely assume that detachment means becoming a cold, unfeeling sociopath who simply does not care about anything or anyone. That is not detachment. That is apathy. And apathy is often just a defense mechanism used by people who are actually too afraid to care. True strategic detachment is entirely different. It is the ability to engage with life completely, to love deeply, and to pursue your goals with relentless intensity, but completely separating your fundamental self-worth from the final outcome. It is a profound psychological shift in your locus of control. An attached person believes their happiness is out there, in the future, dependent on a specific event happening. A detached person knows their happiness and worth are generated entirely internally. Imagine you are working on a massive, life-changing project. The attached person is a nervous wreck, losing sleep, micromanaging every single detail, and constantly terrified of failure because their ego is on the line. The detached person pours the exact same amount of intense effort into the project, but maintains a calm inner core. They silently accept that they can only control their own effort, not the final market response. If the project fails, the attached person's identity is completely shattered.
The detached person simply views the failure as valuable data, pivots effortlessly, and moves forward, with their ego completely intact. Nowhere is the brutal reality of detachment more obvious and impactful than in the complex realm of human relationships and social dynamics. There is a deeply established sociological concept known as the principle of least interest. This principle states that in any given relationship, the person who is the least emotionally invested, or the person who needs the relationship the least, automatically holds the absolute most power. When you are fiercely attached to someone, you live in a constant state of agonizing anxiety. You analyze every single text message they send. You panic when they pull away. And you constantly compromise your own deeply held boundaries just to keep them happy and present in your life. You subconsciously signal to them that they are the grand prize, and you are entirely dependent on their validation. Human beings are biologically wired to be repulsed by intense neediness. But when you actively practice psychological detachment, you become incredibly magnetic. A detached person enters a relationship not because they desperately need to be saved from their own loneliness, but because they simply choose to share their already complete life with someone else. Because they are not terrified of the person leaving, they do not exhibit any controlling, jealous, or suffocating behavior. They allow the other person total freedom, which ironically makes the other person want to stay closer. Furthermore, detachment is your absolute greatest defense against toxic manipulation. Narcissists, manipulators, and emotional abusers rely entirely on your emotional reactivity to control you. When you are detached, you become a psychological fortress. You observe their manipulative behavior with cold, clinical indifference. Because you are no longer deeply attached to their opinion of you, their insults lose all their venom, and their threats of abandonment simply do not work. You starve the manipulator of the emotional reaction they desperately crave, forcing them to eventually retreat entirely.
Mastering the art of psychological detachment is not something that happens overnight. It is a lifelong, highly intentional practice of constantly reining in your ego and consciously releasing your desperate grip on the illusion of control. It requires a daily, brutal assessment of where you are placing your internal value. The next time you find your chest tightening with severe anxiety over a text message, an upcoming job interview, or a social interaction, you must consciously force yourself to mentally step back. Remind yourself that while the outcome may be important, it absolutely does not define who you are. You must fundamentally internalize the reality that people will come and go, massive failures will inevitably occur, and life will rarely go exactly according to your meticulously crafted plans. And that is perfectly okay. By surrendering the exhausting, impossible task of trying to control every single variable, you actually free up a massive amount of psychological energy. You stop existing as a terrified victim of your external circumstances and finally become the calm, highly observant, and deeply grounded architect of your own internal reality. Detachment does not mean you stop living. It simply means you finally stop allowing life to constantly hold you hostage.